Hey, baseball fans, go yard with BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. All season long, we're offering top odds on your favorite home run bets, fast and convenient ways to play same-game parlays, special boosts, and so much more. From the first pitch to the game-winning fireworks, there are more ways than ever to supercharge your excitement. Whether you want to combine multiple bets for the chance at a bigger payout or place a live bet as the game unfolds, BetMGM has all the home run betting options you can need. Download the BetMGM app, head to the ballpark, and get your piece of the MLB action. BetMGM is an official partner of Major League Baseball. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. DC only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One.
Coming back to Las Vegas.
2 nights.
September 20th and 21st.
On one stage.
Streaming live only on Hulu.
A weekend full of superstar performances.
Never seen before collaborations.
And once-in-a-lifetime artist moments you'll have to see to believe.
Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com.
Don't miss
Big Sean. Camila Cabello. Doja Cat. Gwen Stefani. Hozier. Keith Urban. New Kids on the Block. Paramore. Shabuzi. The Black Crowes. Thomas Rhett. Victoria Monet.
and more.
Don't miss your chance to get tickets to our 2024 iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, right now, before they sell out.
At AXS.com. That's AXS.com.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins.
Greetings, one. Greetings, all. Welcome to another edition of this podcast in which we talk to people who are involved in the independent music, whether it's punk, hardcore, metal, doom, indie rock, emo, all the subgenres. Just put them in a blender. That's pretty much what this show does. I love being able to have a person like a couple episodes ago, Fred Armisen, who, comedian, just legendary dude. And then this week's episode, Brett Campbell is the vocalist and guitarist for a band called Pallbearer, who I've been obsessed with for, 10 plus years. When I say obsessed, basically, I don't even need to hear a note of music and I already pre-order the record. I'm just like, I know I'm going to love it. I know I'm going to love whatever changes they put on top of it. And Pallbearer, humble brag here, they're one of the very few people that they follow on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. But anyways, the reason I mention that is because I love Pallbearer, and they just released a new record called Mind Burns Alive that is so beautiful. I love it so much. And I had to have Brett on. I had Joseph from the band come on 5-6 years ago, but I was like, you know what? When a new record comes up, I always am interested in finding out more about the people that make the music that I enjoy. So that's what we got today. Brett Campbell from Pallbearer. And if you've never listened to Pallbearer, no better time than diving into this new record. A great entry point for anybody who's like, I like metal with some melody. And, especially, if you like doom, broadly speaking, you absolutely have to listen to Pallbearer. But let's talk about ways you can support the show, because I do get emails from people being like, hey, could I donate some money via PayPal? Or no, don't worry about that. Totally fine. Just, partake in some of the advertisements, listen to them and appreciate them and visit their websites and all that stuff. But you can support the show, first of all, by emailing me 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Just love to hear feedback, whether it's guest ideas, whether it's music to share, whatever the case may be. Love to see that. The DMs are open, as they say, or the inbox is open. You can also leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast page. Helps out tremendously. Excuse me, burp there. Why edit this out? This is raw and unfiltered. Anyways, you can also leave a rating on the Spotify page if you listen to the show on Spotify. All of those things help because basically, it just feeds the algorithm, feeds the beast. And then that way it spits out recommendations for people to be like, hey, you may like this if you listen to this. You know how it goes. And then also weekly recommendations. Been doing this all year and I want to continue on because obviously I committed to this. I just love sharing music as well. So let's talk about this week's recommendation, the new Thou record. It's called Umbilical. It's out now on Sacred Bones Records. Brian from the band and I had a great podcast 3 or so years ago. I don't know why I need to make that sound when I'm like thinking. Anyways, about 3 years ago, and ever since then, I'm like, this dude knows about 90s metalcore. So I just love randomly tossing him bands that are just completely inconsequential, irrelevant, just like, I mean, when I say irrelevant, like they put out records, but it's like, no one speaks about these bands. I just love like finding random 7-inches where I'm like, Brian, you heard about this? Anyways, Brian is the vocalist for the band. I love Thou. That is the point of this diatribe. The new record is crushing. It is so good. And just everything that Thou has been, I feel like the past 2-3 years or so, Thou has like gone to a new level. Like, I mean, they're split with Emma Ruth Rundle. My gosh, it's so good. Anyways, this new record, it came out and that's all I've been listening to. It's just a great bummer of a record. And that's what Thou goes for. So if you want to listen to that record and listen to all of the previous recommendations that I've been going through on a week-to-week basis, go in the show notes and you'll be able to get a link that will take you to the Spotify playlist where you'll be able to listen to all of the things I've been talking about. Some of these are going to be in my year-end list. Some of them are just good records that I've tripped across. So anyways, I'm getting ready to go to the UK in a couple of weeks. We'll be going to the Outbreak Festival, doing some podcasts there. If you are not listening to the Outbreak Podcast, please listen to it. You can find a link in the show notes as well. And I'm excited to go back over there again. So just getting all that prep work done and, contacting bands and doing all of those interviews. It's the first time I'm actually going to be doing this on video. So there will be no live component, but you'll be doing it on video as well as audio. And so, it'll be a fun time. So can't wait for that. Anyways, let's talk to Brett Campbell. There was a little bit of internet connectivity issues. I did my best to clean it up in regards to any, robot sounding voice. What happens like when you're, doing these conversations over the internet. I've done my best. I think there might be just like a glimmer of one, but, just a little, disclaimer. I was going to say a preamble, but you get it. Anyways, let's talk to Brett Campbell from Pallbearer. Amazing band. So I'll start recording this bad boy. Usually I start these things off with my own kind of personal entry point to your music and everything like that. And I got into you guys definitely in the, early era, as it were, not the, demo side of things, but it was right around when you guys put out the, your first LP in 2012, I want to say. Anyways, this is very random, but you guys came out west. I think it was around the Foundations of Burden era, or like did you guys ever play, when I say out here, as in like Southern California? Clearly, I didn't tell you where I was from. Where did you guys ever play the Roxy in LA, or had like? I'm trying to pinpoint when I saw you guys for the very first time.
Where did we play? What's the place where like Motley Crue used to play? It was just like the 80s metal club.
Well, there's like I was about to say the Viper Room, but you guys wouldn't have played there.
It wasn't Viper Room.
The Whiskey?
I think it was, yeah. Yeah, we played there, I think, the first time we played in LA. And it was pretty strange.
Yes.
The crowd was...
Yes.
It was hard to tell back in those days, kind of like if people were enjoying it, or if they were hating it, or if they were really stoned, because sometimes they would just not really give you a lot of feedback. But yeah, that crowd did not seem very interested, and Well, this was a bit of a lackluster experience. But then LA's been great many other times, but that was just kind of a strange introduction. We also played
Yeah.
like Pomona really early on for like one of those um Scion Fest things. They
Yep.
flew us out for one show, flew us back home. Crazy stuff.
Back in the day when Scion was giving everybody free socks and putting out metal bands records.
It was the strangest thing to happen, but it was great it was great for us. That's how it's the first time I met the guys in Yob who've become, dear friends of ours. And Inner Arma was there, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe? No, I'm confusing that with something else.
Yeah.
But, it was a really fun time.
Yeah. No, it is funny. Like, I'm glad you randomly brought up Scion because I think it was such a time and a place, and you try to describe it to people who obviously are younger than you and I, and who, didn't go to shows like that. And it's like, what do you mean a car company was investing hundreds and thousands of dollars into the metal scene to like
the weirdest thing.
And it wasn't just like a short period of time. It was over, years and years where they did this.
5 or 6 years easily. Yeah, it was amazing. I remember Joe Preston was touring for Thrones, his like solo project, and he played in Little Rock where I live and showed up in a Scion. It's like, yeah, they'll just give them to you. I mean, not to have, but like if you
Right.
want to tour in one, they'll just give you one to you. Blew my mind.
I did not think about that. The idea of like because I mean, obviously most bands are touring and, 15 passenger vans are obviously, larger. I never thought about the idea of, the 1 or 2 person band being able to be like, hey, Scion, can you hook us up?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, which I very often am, but I think the guy that was kind of behind a lot of that was the guy who ended up making the like Writing Easy Records, formerly like Easy Rider Records. It's kind of like stoner label.
Yep.
I think it's the same guy. And so he was just working in their like marketing department, and somehow convinced somebody at Toyota that it would be a good idea to jump car company levels of marketing into underground metal.
I mean,
Unbelievable.
totally. I mean, I guess on one hand it's working because they're literally getting free advertising right now, but the
For
car,
real.
but I mean, obviously that brand doesn't exist anymore. So
Yeah. So in one hand,
totally. Anyways, the reason I brought that up and went down that memory lane was just, I first of all was trying to pinpoint where I saw you guys. And I think it was that whiskey show you mentioned. Anyways, the point being the fact that, what gravitated me, and I know many other people that enjoy you guys, is the fact that obviously you're heavy, doom, metal, whatever, adjective you want to put on it. There was always this, emotion to the band, whether, people obviously refer to your melody and, all of that aspect of what you're doing musically. But I always resonated with the emotion behind it because at the end of the day, like a lot of metal and doom and whatever, I'm painting with a very broad brush here, but
Mhm.
there's a lot of, a lot of posturing, like it's, devoid of emotion, or maybe the only emotion is like anger,
Yeah.
It seems like, was that kind of hard baked into the band? Like when I know you obviously were doing the sports stuff and that kind of evolved into Pallbearer, but like, was that kind of, in the back of your brain that you wanted to have this, more textured emotion into the band, or was that just kind of, it revealed itself over time?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was just natural. Like, I think there's a much wider spectrum of human experience beyond anger. And, although metal, is one of the best avenues to express anger because it's heavy and intense, can be intense. I think metal is not limited to just, using that particular emotion to paint a picture. And I think that metal also can be beautiful. And I think that it can capture a wider breadth of emotions than just rage, you know? And so the subject matter is also just kind of a reflection of how we are. And, you know, I don't really, I try to keep my anger in check. I don't feel like I'm a very angry person. Sure, I get like frustrated about things and I'll get pissed off about some stupid stuff, you know, politics or something, you know, the state of things. It'll make me angry. But like, I feel like um, to only use anger as your jumping off point lyrically, or some sort of like machismo, like tough guy posturing, it's just like undersells the possibilities of the kind of emotional uh, landscapes that metal is capable of creating. Hmm.
Right. Yeah, and it is, I mean, obviously there's that idea of, being one note of musically, where it's like, if a band
Yeah,
is able to
rise
come up
up,
with a
brotherhood, like
formula, and I
yeah,
don't mean that in like the,
or
business plan sense, but it's
partying
like,
in the case of
whatever,
ACDC.
AC/DC or Hatebreed or whatever,
Exactly.
where it's like there's different variations of what they're
Yeah.
doing, but like, what you're getting when you get a new, AC/DC or Hatebreed record. Like, totally, totally. Yeah, right, exactly. Right. Of course, always. But but just that idea that you can, paint beyond what you had done
Yeah,
on the,
totally.
previous
I
record
mean,
or
I
the
think
record
in
before that,
general,
I'm sure
obviously,
makes it liberating for you to be
any
like,
glimpse at our lyrics will
"Yo, we
reveal,
can kinda do
we
whatever we want as
mostly
long as it
deal
obviously
kind of the
operates
darker
under the
side of
banner of, Pallbearer, broadly speaking."
human experience. Um, but I think we don't really have a sense of, defeatism or like absolute nihilism. It's not meant to be, uh, you know, something that's going to trigger depression. It's more of a response to these, you know, darker aspects of life, the difficult times and the difficult. It's a good way to come to terms with them. And oftentimes when I'm working on a song, it will make me realize something about what a situation in my life that I maybe wouldn't have thought about because it forces me to ruminate on it. And, anybody who knows me, like in real life, I'm very jokey person. Like I laugh and like make people laugh and have a good time. My personality is not focused on the negative at all. But I think that allowing being able to channel emotions into the band, even though it seems maybe kind of out of place for people who know me, like it reveals a part of myself I don't really want to people in public or just my friends. Like no one wants to talk about. I don't think most people are interested in talking about like trauma, with your friends. But I think everyone suffers from that kind of stuff, and I'd rather put it into music than broadcast it on social media. So much of, it's just you see people complaining about this, that, and the other on social media, and I'm just like, I don't have the drive to do that. I have my avenues to deal with my whatever's going on, or I could just get a therapist, which is maybe what I should do. But that costs money. But then again, so does being in a band.
Putting the focus on you as a person, I mean, I know, were you actually born and raised in Little Rock, or did you come up in the suburbs?
I was born in South Arkansas, a town called El Dorado, not El Dorado, because we do things a little differently here. But I was born in El Dorado, which is like kind of a crumble. What was once a thriving like oil town, and no longer is. And then eventually moved up to the suburbs of Little Rock when I was a teenager, in like middle school, so right after elementary school. So yeah, like outside of Little Rock. But I moved to Conway, which is north of Little Rock by about 20 or 30 minutes. And went to university there, and that's where I met Joe. But I've lived in Little Rock, or North Little Rock, where I live now, since like 2009. So for a long time, and that's where the music scene is. So I've been a part of that for since maybe like 2004, something like that, 2003.
I know your introduction to music, broadly speaking, like you were definitely, a metal dude if we're just, putting labels on people. That was your introduction as far as, I think I heard you articulate where it was like Opeth was kind of the first band that really, opened your eyes of just like how weird and eccentric music can be.
Yeah. It opened a lot of avenues that got me into like progressive rock, and I mean, a lot of it was the jumping off point. I discovered a lot of metal bands through Opeth, as well as non-metal bands. Like the progressive rock avenue, discover so much more, and I think really my appetite for uniqueness. Like I've always held, I guess I'm easily bored with music because I'm such a huge fan of it. I've heard, and I'm always seeking out novel sounds. And so I don't know if that comes from getting into dog and stuff like that when I was young, but I'm always looking for something exciting and different. And it doesn't have to be like technical, or not that kind of prog guy at all. In fact, I really love minimalism, but I have a huge thirst for like creativity and people who think outside the box, and also think outside the bun.
You're like, we want to be part of the Feed the Beat program, please. And so what, I guess the, attention span of what you're talking about, I presume that maybe school wasn't your forte, or was it okay for you as you were, learning and going to math class and stuff like that?
I was really good at school until I stopped giving a fuck, which was a problem. Like I made really good grades my whole life. I was in all like AP classes and stuff, except for math, which I've always been terrible at, which is funny because music is math. But you can't feel out equations, unfortunately. But yeah, I did pretty good in school, but by the time I got to the latter part of high school, I just felt like I was being understimulated. I just felt like, I don't know, suffocated by suburban Arkansas. Go figure. And the kind of person that I am, and was as a teenager especially, but like I've always kind of just been a sort of person who likes to do things in their own way, and that's not to say that I don't enjoy or am not also willing to and seek out, people who know more than me about something. That's the wisdom of experience. But like, back then I, was very tired of under-stimulating lessons that I could grasp just by reading on my own, or I felt like the pace wasn't right for me, and I felt like there were too many rules. So I kind of just checked out a little bit at the end of high school, but still went to college with like scholarship and stuff. My goal once I got to college was to meet someone that I could start a band with, and because I had never been able to do that in high school because I just couldn't find people. I was writing like extremely technical like death metal stuff. I could never find anybody that could play it. in high school. And when I got to college, my tastes had changed a little bit and I was writing some different kind of stuff. But yeah, I didn't know really what I wanted to get for a degree. I was just there to hopefully form a band. Then I met Joe like within the first, I don't know, 2 months of of my freshman year of college, and we started a band, and eventually I dropped out. So I did what I set out to do.
Listen, listener, you need to pay attention to the fact that band merch is the way that bands are able to make money. Full stop. Yes, guarantees exist and, buying records exist. All these things that put money in your favorite artist's pockets are there. But merch is still the most direct line that they see the most revenue from. And that is a reality. And that's why I love working with this company, rockabilia.com. Use this promo code 100 words or less. It gets you 10% off your entire order. But the connective tissue I'm pulling here is the fact that Rockabilia sells all officially licensed merch, which that means the bands get paid. Incredibly important in these day and age, you get it, of bootlegs. Bootlegs exist all over the place. And trust me, go to Amazon and you will be able to find just so many ripoffs. It's unbelievable. Rockabilia operates here in the United States of America, ships from the Midwest, gets to you lickety split. And trust me, if you are a fan of all genres of music, you will be able to find stuff for yourself, for your friends, your family. And you just probably need a new wardrobe. Just, all those horrible 10-year-old band shirts where you're like, dude, this is a medium. I wear a large now. I probably need to level up here. So go to rockabilia.com, use the promo code 100 words or less. That's the number 100 words or less, and enjoy shopping. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We're sitting here. It's June, and you're like, where has the time gone? And everybody's like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. I got to accomplish all these other things. Take a moment. Focus on the things that obviously, for one, matter to you, but for two, look back. Be like, what have I done well? What have I done not so well? And maybe I can, ask some friends and family for some help. But where I have always gone to in regards to figuring out what I can do better, therapy. Therapy is an incredible tool at your arsenal that you can dip into. I've done it for my marriage. I've done it for myself personally. And I'm a huge advocate for what therapy can do for you because it is a third party that's able to look at what you can do to improve your life and be a person to help you along in your journey. And so I think if you were thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and entirely suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and then boom, you're done. It's great. And then if you're not vibing with the therapist, you can switch it at no additional cost. So take a moment, reflect on the things you've done, reflect on the things you want to do, and visit betterhelp.com/Ray today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Ray. This was something I was going to hit on a little bit later. Just that idea. Because most people look at, either suburbs of cities or actual cities like Little Rock. They're, it's clearly not a, primary or secondary if we're talking about the touring markets. Often the city gets, skipped over. But just that idea that you didn't have people to, collaborate and play with. Because, usually there's, the weirdos that gravitate towards, punk music or whatever. And it's just like, oh, let's start a band that sounds like, whatever, Black Flag. But you were like, I'm playing really wild stuff that not everybody could play. So where do I find these people?
Yeah, that's literally what it was. And it took me a long time. I was a very technical player in those days, and I had to dial it back in order to actually start a band. And sports, of course, was completely atechnical, just free form. And then the early Pallbearer stuff is also pretty simple for the most part. There's some kind of weird arrangement stuff going on, but yeah, it was very dialed back from what I had been writing previously. And I always struggled finding a band because my stuff, I'd use weird time signatures and then just very technical, fast stuff, parts. And it just, I'm like, well, I'm going to have to compromise somewhere. And then eventually we just ended up at Heartless and it went full circle back to fast and technical.
How were your parents reacting to you, diving into this music scene and obviously starting to go to, shows at Little Rock and, be exposed to all of it, hardcore punk, like all this stuff? Were they, I mean, obviously they were permissive enough to like allow you to go to these shows, but were they, concerned about your gravitation towards the dark arts, as it were?
Surprisingly, no. My parents are Christian and I'm kind of shocked that they let me. They're pretty cool, especially nowadays. They're very like, you know, uh, say enlightened, I guess. But um, yeah, I'm kind of surprised. Like they knew I listen. I mean, I'd listen to death metal in the car with my mom before I could drive. When I was and she'd just be like, "Ah, I hate that growling stuff." But she loved like Metallica, and they didn't really like the idea of me going to Little Rock when I was like 16, so I could drive then, but I wanted to go to these shows, and they thought Little Rock was just this like dangerous place, which it isn't. It isn't, despite what some people might say. But by the time I was like 17, they were letting me go to shows, and I was fine. And you know, it, I've always been musical, and I've been obsessed with music for my whole life. And you know, they understood that that's what my favorite interest was. And so, yeah, they were cool. They've always been cool about me pursuing whatever my artistic, muse was at the time. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with drawing. I wanted to be an artist, uh, and then eventually I started playing. I played other instruments, but I started playing guitar, and then that took over.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, and especially too, where the idea of when you like actually start a band and you start to, play shows, and then the concept of, your parents coming to see you play with your, terrible sounding band or whatever. It's like, oh, wow. Like, this, they're going to see me do this thing and they're going to not understand any of it, but they're going to be like, hey, like, I'm glad that Brett's pursuing what he wants to pursue.
Yeah, they're extremely supportive. They still come to my shows whenever we play in town. They're awesome. I mean, without them, I wouldn't have been able to do this because there were parts in the early days where, we weren't making hardly any money, and I was living off the Wendy's dollar menu and beans, and they, would occasionally throw a little bit of money my way to stay alive. And if they hadn't supported me in that way, aside from just the emotional support and everything else, I wouldn't have been able to devote myself to the band in the same way that I did. It was like a full-time endeavor. And I think it being such an obsessive part of my life has allowed it to be as successful as it is, because it is like what I think about all the time. Like, not specifically Pallbearer, but just creating music and music in general, listening to music. If I'd been having to, I mean, I also worked and stuff too, but like I was just always working shitty jobs that didn't pay very much. But yeah, it was awesome. I'm very thankful.
Well, yeah, to your point, it's like that all encompassing thing where I mean, especially it's like once you start to get out there and tour, like you're building your life around the band or art, or broadly speaking, to where, yeah, you're working these transient jobs that will just, oh yeah, I'm going to quit the bagel shop because I'm going to go on tour or whatever. It's like, I'll get another random job. So it's not like you have any aspirations to build off of that quote unquote career. You're like, no, I'm just focused on music and I'll figure that out, whatever that may mean.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I mean, and I'm lucky enough that Joe and I have this like near mystical level of like musical rapport. Um, we're always on the same page in some way. Like, even if we argue about a specific part, which fucking believe it, we will. But overall, our general musical goals are so in sync, and by that I mean we're trying to eventually sound like in sync. But um, it's just it's always worked. No matter what we do, we're always kind of like they're on the same page, which is a really, really lucky thing to have as a creative person. Like have a collaborator who's so tuned into something that's already so weird. Like the approach of what we do is although relatively metal standards, it's still pretty out there from just what the average person would consider music. So as soon as we met each other, like literally from the first time we met, we jammed the first time we met, and just it was like instantaneous that we knew that we were on the same kind of level, and have remained to be this ever since.
Right. Well, I imagine if you were obviously both swimming in the Little Rock scene, you guys were being like, "Hey, you want to play this Wake song?" And then you're just like, "Oh, you know this too?" It's like, "Great, let's go."
That's literally what happened. Yeah.
Little Rock as a scene has always been small, but very vibrant, obviously with bands like I just mentioned, Wake, but then, band like Living Sacrifice as well. But because of the fact that you were operating in such a small scene, like you didn't have the ability to label yourself as like, oh yes, I'm just a metal kid, I'm only going to metal shows, or I'm just a hardcore kid going to hardcore shows. Like you had to go to all the shows in order to just like witness it and be a part of it. Was it fun for you to obviously dip into all these different pools and go to these, noise shows, and then the next day you're going to, a metalcore show or whatever? Like, was it fun?
Oh yeah, and it still is. I'm still like that. I enjoy seeing all kinds of different shows, even if it's, I'm not super into like hardcore, I guess. I like varieties of hardcore, but like I'm not, super into like the beatdown kind of stuff. Although sometimes they can be really cool. I'll still go to those shows. It's great crowd watching, Sometimes it can be entertaining. Sometimes I'm surprised by a band that I didn't expect that I'd like. I think it's really important to keep an open mind about stuff, um, especially music or just anything. Just keep an open mind. But if you want to enjoy things, um, you can't have all these preconceptions about them. Like if you decide you don't like something before you've even experienced it, then you're potentially depriving yourself of a very enjoyable thing. So yeah, I mean, I love going to different kind of shows still to this day, and I don't know how much of that was formed by those early experiences and just seeing a bunch of stuff, or if that's just kind of how I'm wired. It's like a chicken and an egg thing. I don't really know.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, and I think what makes that experience interesting and special is because you get to know all of these people that are creating different bands and styles, and then you learn so much from them in the same way that they learn from you as well when you start to put music out in the world. And then you'll be like, hey, even though our bands don't sound alike at all, I like you as a person, we should just play shows together. And like that just really, that obviously is able to develop a scene.
100%. Yeah. And I think that is a wonderful thing about kind of having a smaller town like that. Like Little Rock is, I think, 200,000 people, pretty damn small. Like the proper city, like the area itself is bigger, like the metro area is bigger than that, but it's a pretty small city. And if you are in the music scene long enough and you want to, if you take the time, you can meet pretty much everyone. You can know everyone.
Even though your focus was obviously music, as you were being who you were as an individual, like, were you, outgoing? Were you an introvert? Like, did you play sports? Where did you land on that spectrum?
Never played sports. Well, I played like t-ball when I was a kid, and I think I got to the pitching machine, and one day I would just, well, I mean, I was like in somewhere in the outfield and would just daydream about being like Batman or something. And just every time the ball came my way, I was like completely zoned out. then one day I like jumped. I was in the dugout, and I like jumped off the bench for some reason, kneed myself in the face, and I was like, I think that's when my parents realized I wasn't particularly athletic. Um, so no, was never super into sports. Um, and I would say that I'm sometimes introverted, sometimes extroverted. Perhaps like a performative extrovert, because I'm like sometimes I'm very introverted, and other times I feel like I can turn on the extroversion if the situation calls for it, you know.
Sure.
But and other times I'll feel awkward and don't know what to say, so I
Yeah.
don't really know where I fall on that line.
And kind of on that topic, the idea of, when you get up on stage and start to play, I mean, I know that you obviously had done this for many years as you were, linking up with Joseph and starting to build, sports and all that sort of stuff. Did you immediately take to the idea of being on stage, or did you have to learn what it was like to be? I mean, granted, sports is different because you guys were, trying to bum people out with how loud you were. But like, did that come naturally being on stage like that?
Yeah, honestly, I'm still not very good at talking to a crowd. Like I don't feel nerves anymore on stage after playing however many thousand shows I've played. But I, st- I don't know. I think there is a very that like the ability to talk to a crowd is a pretty amazing skill that I don't really have. Um, I think probably just because the way my brain works is so like, um, it might take a zigzag at any point into a different direction. And so I'll like start thinking about something and train of thought and start talking about something else, which you'll probably have noticed by the time that we get done with this, that has a tendency to happen. I think when I'm on stage, I'm so focused on like the performance. I try to like embody the songs, and the subject matter of the music is so, you know, it's as heavy as the sound, So by the nature of my personality and my tendency to turn everything into some kind of joke, I feel like talking on stage is probably a little superfluous. And I mean, there's people who can do it, like to come back to the Opeth thing, like the Michael Eckerfeld he's a very funny, front man. He's entertaining, and that's an incredible skill. But, I think as it is nowadays, I prefer just to say very little on stage, just let the music do the talking. I think probably I'm going to lean even more into that in the future. We've been talking about um, having like soundscape stuff.
Suits the music you play based around the fact that it's like, it would be a pretty wild juxtaposition of you getting up there and being like this absolute goofball telling jokes, and people are like, well, it's sort of taking me out of the vibe that you guys are creating.
Yeah, exactly. Every time we'd say something like, and Joe's the same way. I don't know, we'd just start saying some stupid shit. I'm just, why did I even open my mouth? So I just keep it to like, thanks, I remember seeing Neurosis, and they wouldn't say a single word the entire show, and it just created this feeling of like elemental power, because you don't want like I don't want focus on me specifically when we're playing. Like I want to become part of the band. That's why I don't stand in the middle. I stand in front of my guitar cab. We uh, I'm less important as a focal point, and I feel like talking to the crowd like puts some sort of focus on me as like a quote unquote front man, which I'm not. I'm just part of the band.
Well, and especially with the idea, like, I know, I mean, clearly you sing for the band, but it's one of those things where the way that I personally feel towards the way that you blend the vocals within the context of the band is the fact that like this is another instrument. And I know that sounds like a total stupid cliche, but it is highlighting the fact that this is another layer of our music. Like we could play instrumental, but like, no, this is just another layer of it. And so I could see where that idea of you not trying to lose the focus of like, oh, here I am, this larger than life personality as a front person. It's like, no, that's not the vibe of it.
Absolutely. You nailed it, man. I mean, I've always said that like my guitar leads and my vocals could be just like interchangeable. It comes from the same like melodic sensibility. Maybe not some of the solos, because that would be some pretty interesting vocal scat, but I'll leave that to like Disturb.
You know what makes me happy about this whole awesome independent music scene is when people come up with cool businesses that not only support themselves, but support the art around them. And that is where evilgreed.net. You need to point your web browser there immediately because they are a purveyor of fine, heavy music, merchandise, and records from bands of all shapes and sizes, but they have a very specific point of view. They travel in what I like to call artistic heavy stuff. And so let me just list some of the bands that they work with, whether it's like, hey, they got a, pre-order for the new Balance and Composure record, but then they also work with labels like Triple B and Days. And they also work with bands like Nothing and Crypt Sermon and so many more. Trust me, when you go to their website and start poking around, you will just be like, oh, wait, could I get that? Yes. Could I get that? Of course. Put it all in your cart and then you'll be able to check out. And what's cool about them is they operate out of Berlin, Germany, but the exchange rate is advantageous for us right now here in America. It ships to you for relatively cheap and it gets to you relatively fast. Like as an example, I live in California. I've ordered from them before. Stuff has arrived in like 8 or 9 days. Incredible stuff. I love evilgreed.net and I know you will too. So go to their website, buy a bunch of stuff, records, t-shirts, hoodies, everything in between, and then enjoy. And then, I mean, hey, if you're in Europe, like boom, that stuff's getting to you like next day. Maybe I'm overpromising, but for the most part, they know exactly what they're doing. Actually, not for the most part, they know what they're doing. Full stop. evilgreed.net. Enjoy.
Hey, baseball fans, go yard with BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. All season long, we're offering top odds on your favorite home run bets, fast and convenient ways to play same-game parlays, special boosts, and so much more. From the first pitch to the game-winning fireworks, there are more ways than ever to supercharge your excitement. Whether you want to combine multiple bets for the chance at a bigger payout or place a live bet as the game unfolds, BetMGM has all the home run betting options you can need. Download the BetMGM app, head to the ballpark, and get your piece of the MLB action. BetMGM is an official partner of Major League Baseball. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. DC only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
When Pallbearer got hooked up with Profound Lore, was it one of those things that like once you started to get, labels involved and you started to, play some shows and stuff like that, was it interesting for you to start to like navigate, the business side of the band, or was it something that you enjoyed the fact that you were able to even think about the band in these terms?
I was not prepared for that at all. I was pretty much like a wreck at that point in my life. I wasn't really I didn't know a damn thing. And I don't know, I was running from a lot of problems at that point in my life. So yeah, the business type of side of things was like way beyond me. I could barely take care of myself. And Joe kind of did that stuff days because he was, although also fucked up, like he had more experience, I guess. He actually graduated college, so he had some life skills. So that took some time, and eventually, like, also keep in mind we were making like such little. Even those early tours, we toured with Enslaved really early. That was our first like big tour we did, and we were making like just practically just gas money. We almost ran out of gas money in the middle of frozen Canada in February, and we were down to like so little. But we persevered. We were just like, eventually, this is going to pay off. People have got to hear us first before we, can have fans have to hear you. So we just toured and toured and toured, and you can be, yeah, absolutely. And you can be, turns out, you're a pretty fucked up person and just tour all the time. You don't really have to not be fucked up. So, I was just really, really, just drink way, way, way too much and just do whatever else, um, whatever, and really take very good care of myself. But it didn't really. You're paid in beer basically at that point. So it took several years for me to kind of get more of a handle on that side of myself and kind of put it together. But that came from years and years of partying every single day, and eventually kind of had to realize that it's not sustainable long term, and it wasn't really making me happier.
Sure. Well, you said at the beginning of our conversation, the idea of, you were running from yourself in certain respects, of the idea of, oh yeah, like I can numb whatever feelings I'm having of negativity with the fact that I'm on tour, I'm getting paid, whatever, $100 a night, but like, dude, I got a case of beer. Like life's pretty good, even though you were not actually diagnosing and taking care of yourself, as you put it before.
Absolutely. That's it. Exactly.
When did you kind of, I guess, realize like the sustainability fact of it, the fact that you couldn't go out there and, continue to abuse yourself either physically or mentally? When did you reach that realization? Was it, like you said, many years in?
It was during the Heartless touring cycle, which was pretty strenuous, just in general, because we played a ton of shows on that touring cycle. Not a whole lot of time off, time between shows. So it was very, very on for time. And eventually my body was just like rejecting everything. Like had a really bad case of like bronchitis and like a sinus infection that went on for probably, but I was just on the road and I never had time to go to the doctor. And so eventually, when I did go to the doctor, they looked in my nose and were like aghast at what they saw. They said, you have a severe long-term sinus infection. So I kept losing my voice on that tour. Like there's Nate Garrett from Spirit had to do vocals for me at one show, and I think Devin did vocals. And even the songs that I was able, is when I had it, it still wasn't very good. At times, I was just those are hard. It's a heartless talk to sing anyway, and there was a number of factors that went into it, like stage monitoring stuff, which is something we've since figured out. Have some pretty years, but we've figured everything out the hard way, one step at a time. Everything that we learned by doing it wrong. At one point. So, but by that point, my immune system was just non-existent. I would get sick constantly. I was tired and worn down. I was like having regular anxiety, like extreme waves of overwhelming anxiety, just while, passively sitting or something. I was just in a really, really bad place, and exhausted emotionally and physically by the end of that Heartless cycle. And I told our manager, Simon, I was just like, we're taking a year off or I can't continue doing this. Like I can't tour for a year. I can't, or I'm not going to be in the band anymore. I'm going to die, And so, shit, I guess even leading up to that, I had started kind of figuring some stuff out about myself and trying to cut back on the things that were bad for me, and kind of started to have some insight into why I felt certain ways that were bringing me down. And, once I kind of put a pinpoint on some of those things, I was able to, deal with them in healthier ways than I had been. And, when we finally got that time off, I had, around the same time, practically that exact same time, my girlfriend and I got a place together. She had lived in another state, and that was like the first really stable living situation I'd been in a long time, and it was really good for me. Like it just helped me in many ways. So it took a long time. Like, I don't know if the band started in 2008, so sometime like 10 years, I guess.
I think a lot of what you were experiencing, it's not uncommon when people are dedicating themselves to a life of the arts, and then you get put in a lot of different situations. Like, touring is not normal, like regardless of what level you're experiencing at. And then on top of it, you're mixing, alcohol, other substances, and you're just like, oh yeah, so be responsible. You're like, I barely know how to do that, like in quote unquote real life, let alone on tour. And then I don't have time to think about myself outside of the context of like, okay, I'm going to be driving for 8 hours, and then, maybe I've got a 40-minute set, and like, that's my work for the day. And like, what even is this? Like, yeah. So I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's insane. And that's the thing. People at the time are like, "Oh, you're so lucky you get to tour." I'm like, touring is not so glamorous. Like, it's extremely grueling, and the only thing that often can get me through a show, if I'm so tired, is like slamming some whiskey to give myself, I don't know, to be so drunk that I don't know that I'm tired or sick. I mean, there was one point on the Enslaved tour that I mentioned earlier. Like, this is kind of funny. I'd gotten this because it was February and we were going into Canada and stuff, which at one point it was like 40 below. It was insane, especially for an Arkansan. Like, no fucking way. But I had this like Under Armour stuff like made for extreme cold. And my dumbass didn't wash it, but I was wearing it for days, obviously without showering because there was no shower at any point. Like, I think we'd get like one shower a week if we were lucky. Um, it was disgusting, horrible. But yeah, so I was wearing this thing for like 3 or 4 days, and I was getting like sicker and sicker, uh, to the point where I would just be curled up in a ball backstage, and it's like, well, we've got to be on in 20 minutes. So I'd just turn the whiskey bottle upside down and chug it to give myself like energy, I guess, and to numb the fact that I felt like dog shit. And I'd get on stage, play the show, and then immediately curl back into a ball. I thought I was fucking dying. And then one day we finally got a hotel, and I I took that Under Armour off, and I was covered in hives from my neck to my wrists and ankles. My face was normal and my hands were normal, but I was covered in hives from head to toe. It's like, what what is going on here? Do I need to go to a hospital? But I got a shower and wiped, whatever substance was in that like hell suit, my allergy suit, off, and I was fine. Like, I felt like immediately better, like in an hour. So I'd just been extremely allergic to whatever chemicals they'd sprayed on that stuff, and never washed it. So, but that was just incredible. Yeah, it was perseverance. I'm like, I'm gonna play the show even if I fucking drop dead.
Well, and it's funny too, because you do, like, I mean, yes, like the Enslaved tour was obviously a large opportunity and you're playing for a lot of people, but you also like you can feel that compulsion even if you're pulling up to, a venue where you're going to play in front of 20 people. It's still that idea that like, this is what I'm out here doing, so I need to do it regardless of the size. And so that self-imposed pressure that happens is really, it's something.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to play a bad show if I can do anything about it. Because I mean, even if it's 20 people, that might be the only time those 20 people get to see you. And if you suck, then they're always going to have a bad impression of something that you put your whole life into. It's at this point the most important like work that I've done. So, yeah, I feel like I owe it to the audience and also to myself.
And on that same, notion, the idea of the fact that the band has existed for a long period of time, like it's funny, and I'm sure you're kind of the same way, where, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like a relatively newer band. I mean, even though I wouldn't call Pallbearer a new band for obvious reasons, but like you guys still feel new to me, even though I've been listening to you for 10 years. And what do you attribute, I mean, the longevity of the band for? Because there's a joke in the fact that the hardest part of playing in a band is staying together. Is it just the fact that like you and Joe are on some, real, like you said before, mystical connection stuff that is able to keep everything going? Or is it the fact that now you're adults and it's much easier than it was when you were, idiots like 5 to 10 years ago?
If you think that I'm not an idiot, extremely wrong, but I am an adult idiot now. Yes. I, I think it's, I mean, well, obsession, B, lack of being able to do anything else. I've been doing this since my early 20s and have no skills. C, uh, we're all four of us really good friends and enjoy hanging out together, thus also making music. I think we're lucky in that way. I'm not going to go down the whole alphabet, but yeah, we're really good friends. We still enjoy playing music, and I don't feel like we've exhausted the possibility of this project. Like I don't feel limited in practically any way, and I just started to think of like, what can we do next? I think by the nature of like imposing upon ourselves from day one that each album was going to and each phase of the band was going to be different, that it remains exciting. And like, I don't think we've strayed extremely far from our core sound, but even so, borders are so wide that it still allows for a lot of activity. And, if we ever reach a point where I feel like the ideas that are coming are not inspiring, but within the parameters of that we've set for ourselves, then we'll just change the parameters.
The last thing I want to hit on was the fact that this kind of goes back to the, you not considering yourself a front man as far as the, traditional sense of the term is used. And, I mean, obviously the band exists on social media. Like clearly you need to, participate in certain things that you yourself may not feel comfortable. Like, I mean, you don't strike me as a person that's a social media influencer or trying to, make the band more popular, to get on TikTok or whatever. So I'm sure. What's the what's the balance for you in regards to like, putting yourself out there? Is it just one of those things where you're like, yeah, I've never felt comfortable to do that, so I'm obviously not going to participate in this? Or what's the what's the trade-off knowing that you have to participate in, certain ways to get yourself out there?
It's very strange, and it's something that I'm very bad at. I understand the value of social media, especially in the position that I'm in. Like, there's a million bands all vying for ears, and music being an art form that exists in time. You can only listen to so much. You can look at a lot of pictures a lot faster than you can to a lot of songs. So, the honest is to make remember that we exist, you know? So I see the value in social media, but on the other hand, it gives me diarrhea. Like it just like the social media and interacting with social media and the amount of time and mental uh, bandwidth that requires to be interacting with people on social media is like it seems like a huge. I mean, to me, it fills me with like a deep, deep anxiety. And there's times, and if anybody that I know is listening to this, reason I sometimes don't answer your messages on Instagram or whatever is because it overwhelmingly intense. I don't know why that is, but like I'll see just messages pile up, and instead of answering them, I'm just like, I can't fucking handle this because it snowballs into this giant thing forever. And it's not that I'm talk to people. It's just that like once you start, like how do you get out of it? It'll just take your entire day. And I want to focus on stuff that's more important to me than just promoting my Instagram or whatever. Like I know it's important, but like if I just then when am I gonna work on when am I gonna obsess over for my guitar sound, you know? And maybe there's said for like a balance, but you know, as I've said many times over this, you know, I'm very obsessive about the creative side of music, and I wish I had a little more. I think it would be beneficial to me if I was a better self-hype man. You know, a lot of the most, yeah, just a tiny droplet of Gene Simmons. No, maybe not actually. I don't need. Who knows what I'd get from a droplet of Gene Simmons? Probably something that doesn't wash off. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I just want to. I do need to try that more, and I've endeavored to do that. Like we have like a disc. There's like 7 people on, and I try to talk to those people. I love it because it's a tiny pool of people. Talk to those people. So I don't know. I do need to, and also like I said earlier, yeah, I am trying, and like I said, like I have a tendency to just default to like the stupidest thing imaginable. So all of my social media, I mean, look at my Instagram, my personal Instagram, it's just like the dumbest shit. And I don't know how to be serious on that kind of form. And it's like, well, is this really the presentation this band requires? I don't know. I just need to get better at it.
Well, I mean, it's something that is unnatural for most people, even if you're used to try to hyping yourself up there. But it's just, all it is a presentation of yourself in like the most, egotistical way. And sometimes that's just really difficult for people to even like come to grips with. So I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel about it. Like I've always kind of valued like, people with a bit of humility, like the kind of self-rising people. It's always seemed gross to me. I feel like actions speak for themselves, or the quality of your art speaks for itself. I have to tell people it's good. If it's good, people know it's good. And there's a lot of hack folks out there who claim to be the greatest. And guess what? I give them because I've heard their stuff, and it's boring. Even worse than something sucking is being boring. I mean, I feel like, I've spent work in my 20s to try to get a good, you know, to, to understand the place of a human and reality, And I don't think that most people deserve the kind of like the egotist. I don't think they really earned those egos. There's very few people who, you know, play this self, self obsession or self, which maybe that's not the right term, but you know what I mean? Egotism, narcissism. Most of those people haven't really earned those feelings. It's like a weird self delusion, just like fucking get over yourself. But then social media rewards those types of people, and it's kind of geared towards false vision of what you want people to think you are. And the thing is, like with me, you get exactly who I am or who you are. You're going to me, and I'm not going to put on a face. I don't have time for that shit, nor do I have the energy or the desire. So, it's hard to, you know, market Pallbearer because the subject matter is such a specifically compartmentalized part of my life. It's not necessarily reflective of my day-to-day mind state, And so in order to like get there, it's a big thing. And to try to capture the to which we've like focus on the songs and the amount of thought that goes into the lyrics and the arrangements and like the emotional timbres of the songs to just be like to encapsulate it into is kind of not just impossible, but a lot of the times I feel like it undersells the that the stuff has for us. It just feels weird. The marketing aspect. I know I know it's necessary everything, but it always feels weird. And this last few weeks have been marketing, and it's just like it's the string part of this business for me.
Yep. No, I totally understand that, especially when it's like when it doesn't come natural to a person and then having to feel like you have to participate because the only way that people find out about your art is if you participate. And so it's just like this, whatever, Sophie's choice of like, do I do this because I need to? Or yeah. And so I totally understand where you're coming from. And there's no, to your point, like there's no right answer. There's just different comfort levels. And like, yes, you can push yourself a little bit, but not to the point of where, you're doing something that's like completely against who you are as a person to be like, hey guys, here's Brett doing, my 17th rig rundown of the day. It's like, oh Jesus, like that's not you. Like you'll do one, maybe.
I'd do that in a heartbeat.
You're like, I'll do 17. That's no problem.
Well, I'm a huge nerd, so yeah, please 17. Yeah, that's.
Brett, I really appreciate you hanging out with me, and thanks for letting me bounce around your brain.
Yeah, man, it was a pleasure. It's really nice time.
That was that. What a sweetheart he is, and just Taco Bell, pay attention. He wants Pallbearer as a part of Feed the Beat program. I swear. Actually, fun fact. I took this idea to Del Taco, a regional, they've somewhat expanded, but primarily in Southern California. I took this idea where basically I wanted to do a similar version of Feed the Beat for Del Taco. Got in touch with the marketing manager and had a phone conversation with them. That was probably one of the most awkward / worst phone calls I've ever had because they were just like, who are you? Do you work at Del Taco? I was like, no, I love the brand and I think you should support bands. But anyways, full circle, sponsor Pallbearer, please, Taco Bell. They want that. Just give that to them. So next week, I have a great discussion with Bart Balboa from Birds in Row. This band is a French hardcore, screamo, grindcore. I don't know. You can put a lot of different subgenres on them, but I recently, I would say probably the past 2-3 years, have become really entrenched with the band, even though they've put out a lot of great records before that. And I thought they were cool, but it wasn't until recently where it just really cemented itself in my brain. And I was like, I got to talk to Bart because he is a really, really talented tattoo artist as well. And I just love the band. So had to make this happen. And we did. He's French and it was great because I felt like I was a really smart person talking to someone not in French. I wasn't speaking to him in French. He was speaking in English, but it's that accent, really gets you. But that's what I got on the show next week. Until then, please be safe, everybody. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Trust me in saying that no matter who you are, mental health challenges can affect you, and how you manage them can make all of the difference. That's why everyone should have access to mental health support that meets them where they are and helps them get through. BetterHelp provides online therapy on your schedule. It's flexible, simple to use, and more affordable than in-person therapy. Connect with a licensed therapist selected just for you. Learn more at betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com.
Our iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One.
Coming back to Las Vegas.
2 nights.
September 20th and 21st.
On one stage.
Streaming live only on Hulu.
A weekend full of superstar performances.
Never seen before collaborations.
And once-in-a-lifetime artist moments you'll have to see to believe.
Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com.
Don't miss
Big Sean. Camila Cabello. Doja Cat. Gwen Stefani. Hozier. Keith Urban. New Kids on the Block. Paramore. Shabuzi. The Black Crowes. Thomas Rhett. Victoria Monet.
and more.
Don't miss your chance to get tickets to our 2024 iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, right now, before they sell out.
At AXS.com. That's AXS.com.
As the #1 audio company, iHeartMedia gives you access to all. Every audience, live conversations, trusted influencers, and the insights and data you need to grow. iHeartMedia is your access company. Go to iHeartResults.com for more.